that easy.
Ready to rock.
Yeah. I see we got the memo for...
We got the memo.
We got the memo for wearing the black...
Wearing the black.
black t-shirts today. I'm a little... I think that's good. All right. Hey, welcome, everyone. Dr. Sukhi.
Great to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate this.
Yeah. So welcome. We are grateful to be here working, playing, doing this conversation on the traditional, unceded, and ancestral territory of the Snuneymuxw people, who are part of the Coast Salish people that are up and down the west coast of North America. And we are thankful for their thousands of years of managing this land and for all that they are teaching us about this land and about the traditions here on Vancouver Island. And for that we say Haichka.
Haichka.
Yeah. So I'm excited. I've known Sukhi a long time, and so this is a great pleasure for me. So first of all, I'll just give a little intro here. So Dr. Sukhi is a vitalistic chiropractor. He has a practice in West Vancouver, has been for over 20 years.
Yeah, 23 years. 23
years. Center for Optimal Living is what the banner is on the front of the building. And he's also an Ironman competitor. He's also a family man, 2 kids, wonderful wife, great family, lots of friends, lots of connections. He coaches docs in the chiropractic world around the globe, speaks on international stages, has traveled the world speaking, sharing his message. And I think what I'll share is that when I look at you and I see where you are today, where I'll start with is if you go to his website, you'll see at drsukhi.com where in the About section, it says, I hit rock bottom and almost lost my life. At 18, I was immersed in a life of crime, violence, and drugs. I was suicidal for months, strategizing on the best way to end my life. I had too many pills, too much drugs, too much booze. I couldn't handle my life anymore. I'd gone too far.
Whew. That was 33 years ago. Yeah.
And for those that know me, they know that I shared last week on a podcast here that I struggle sometimes with this idea of thinking that people can achieve anything in their life, that there's a world of possibility. And I shared that it's easy for me to say that because I was born in this country, raised in this country. I had great parents. There was never anything that I was wanting for. I had food on the table, like all of those things.
Yeah.
So in some capacity, it seems to me like a bit of a falsehood, right? Like, how could I possibly say that when I haven't had that? But then, I have somebody like you as a friend of mine who I can, I know your struggle.
Yeah.
I know what you've experienced, and then I see where your life has taken you. And so maybe that's a great place to start is on that journey, but I look at it also like a healing journey, because one of the things about unity is this idea of healing. So why don't we jump off at that point?
So if we go back 33 years ago, it's fascinating when you get to a place in your life where more of you wants to leave this world than the part of you that wants to stay. So then you start strategizing, had the failed suicide attempt, and the moment after that, Thomas, more of me wanted to stay than wanted to go. And that was my turning point. The switch, the direction, the focus was, I was no different, but it's almost like my head moved in the complete opposite direction. And that's really when my healing journey began, which my spiritual journey began. And I don't separate, as you know, our physical, mental, emotional, and our spiritual health. It's all connected. And then from that place where what happened after that, I spent 3 months with complete breakdown, total nervous system shutdown, where I was catatonic in a bed. And, a good day was getting from the bed to the bathroom. That was like a good day in that 3 months. Eventually I could get to the couch. Eventually I can go to the front yard. Eventually I could walk down the street. I mean, that, my friends, that was like a year right there.
Right.
I could get to the end of the street after a year of being there. Like,
Right.
so when we're talking baby steps, we are really, really, really talking baby steps. And a lot of silence. You know, we're going back decades ago. There's no internet. There's no cell phones. You're not laying in your bed on social media.
Right.
I mean, you are staring at the ceiling, watching the paint dry all day, every day.
Right.
There's an immense amount of introspection. And I'll say, you know, the fatigue, the depression, the anxiety, and the suicidal thoughts, that stayed for years. But I never acted on those thoughts. But that was all being in the journey of my healing journey, moving through that. And, you know, what I'll also say is I tried everything up to that point. Everything that I was told to do from the outside in, I was doing, and it was not successful. I got worse. So for me, I'm a holistic healthcare practitioner, and I'll tell you, 33 years ago, I didn't be like, oh, well, let's get into this holistic healthcare stuff. I was desperate.
Right.
And it was like, okay, well, there's a whole world here. I have no idea what it is, but this didn't work, so maybe this will work.
Right.
Changed my life.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. You're 18. You hit this rock bottom.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, within a year, you've started to emerge. Is that right? Is that
I
accurate?
started to emerge.
Right.
I was raised on the other side of the tracks, crime, violence, addictions. I had amazing parents. They loved me, and they spent their time working long hours in a factory. And I always say we're either parented, meaning our parents are present, guiding us, or we're parented. I don't know, what's the term? Is it latchkey? Is that
Yeah.
Classic, right?
Yeah.
Come home from school, no one's there, so you're just on the street.
Yeah.
I think last time I counted, it's like 32 kids lived on my street. So it was like one of those streets, right? Like always something to do, street hockey, this, that. And in an environment that is the lowest socioeconomic status as far as postal codes are concerned in the country, there's a lot of that stuff too.
Right.
And nobody ever forced me, but for me, it just looked attractive. When I saw the people engaging in that sort of way. So that was sort of the direction that I'd went. So when I did go to India, things were really bad here. And so bad where it was questionable whether, someone was going to knock me off and I'd be 6 feet under. So I figured I should probably get the heat off and go. That was the intention of originally leaving. And I have family in India, so I went and visited them. So the intent was to get out of an environment where my life was at risk.
Right.
But what emerged was a way of being and a way of living that was so foreign to me. And it was probably the first time that I was, I know now I was like out of the sympathetic stress mode. I felt peace in my heart. I'd been off drugs for months, which I started, using recreational drugs when I was 12 years old.
Right.
And so I was able to cultivate a connection with myself as a teenager that I never experienced in this life yet. And that was profound. In fact, I told one of the monks at the monasteries in India, this is northern India, lower from the Himalayas, and I said, I don't want to leave. I want to stay here, and I want to be a monk. Like that was it. Like I was good with it, And I was 16 years old, and dude was like, nope. And this is what an elder said to me in that, monastery type environment, Thomas. He said, You need to go back to your home and teach them these principles and this way of being. I thought to myself at 16, oh dear, this guy has absolutely no idea who I am in my world.
Right.
Like a 16-year-old punk from the street. And, here I am, 50 years old, and I think, how did that guy know? He was so right.
He planted the seed.
He planted the seed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So part of this healing journey, what I also want to get to is this idea that, I've shared with you the story of Myrtle Fillmore and healing herself and realizing that there was this incredible intelligence within us.
Yeah.
And so there's the healing that you went through on a spiritual level,
Yeah.
and who you are, and finding yourself and finding your groove and a passion in your life, something to share.
Right.
But there's also the healing journey that I've come to know from you just within myself, as I have been a patient of yours over the course of time, and I understand that process. And so maybe, and I kind of want to, if I can, sort of take this into quantum physics as well. If
let's do it.
I know you're comfortable with that.
Yeah.
But this idea of healing ourselves from within, and obviously there's states where you're in where it doesn't matter what you do, it's time. It's time to go. But there is an incredible intelligence within us that we can call upon. And so when I say something like that to you, what does that mean to you when you think of that?
Absolutely. So my formal education, I spent a decade in post-secondary school. I had 3 different degrees, and it was a big focus in neuroscience, a big focus in physiology, and my personal passion was quantum physics. So this is a little triangle I live in. Quantum physics meets neurology meets physiology. So, if we just talk 101 physiology, the nervous system creates over 10,000 new cells every single day. The greatest minds that have ever walked the face of the planet, if we put them in a room, we still can't create a single cell in a petri dish. This completely blew my mind away, Thomas, sitting in a classroom. I asked my exercise physiology prof. I was like, whoa. I put up my hand. I was like, can you say it again? He's like, the intelligence and life force that flows through the human nervous system creates over 10,000 new cells every day. It creates a brand new human being every 7 years. Let me make a quantum physics statement. So Fritz Albert Popp, biophysicist, so in the world of quantum physics, he measures light emissions in the human body, okay? So light emissions occur, every chemical reaction that occurs at a cellular level, light is emitted.
Okay.
That is the down trickle effect of the chemical reaction. So check out how staggering our intelligence and life force is. We're made up of approximately 100 trillion cells. Okay. Some say 50 trillion, some say 120. Let's just call it 100, okay? A lot of cells in this mind-body temple. 100 trillion cells. Fritz Albert Popp said, the human nervous system is responsible for orchestrating and coordinating over 100,000 chemical reactions every second for every cell. 100 trillion cells, 100,000 chemical reactions every second is all coordinated by this intelligence. And to make this term even simpler, we were all created from 2 cells. And this intelligence inside our mother's body took us from conception about 40-ish weeks later, 2 arms, 2 legs, cardiovascular system, reproductive system, immune system, 2 eyes, a human being. So for me, this is actually a scientific statement.
Right.
It is not a philosophical statement.
Right.
We are intelligent human beings. The life force and intelligence within every human being within you listening
Yeah.
is greater than any other intelligence out there. It is the greatest technology that humanity knows.
Right.
And it lives within every human being.
You know, when I think of that, just me personally, when I actually think of the idea that this incredible intelligence exists within me and within you and with everybody I know, you know, whether I'm walking in the mall or giving a sermon on Sunday morning, it's overwhelming to think.
It is.
And then to, you know, at the same time, just knowing myself, to think of that and then to find myself stuck in, you know, damn, this seat doesn't adjust the way I would like it to.
That's awesome.
You know, like it's crazy, right?
It's crazy.
Like
Yeah.
to be troubled about something like that when in
Yeah.
fact there's all of this incredibleness going on
Yeah.
just within each moment, each second,
Every moment,
as you
every
shared.
second. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So knowing that then, and in your practice, you know, when I say, and you and I have talked about this many times, but when you hear something like Myrtle Fillmore that said, hey, I prayed to every part of my body and asked forgiveness for ever thinking that you were, you know, wrong or that you were bad or that you were incapable of serving me at the highest level.
Right.
And seeking out that forgiveness and doing it on a daily basis, a practice. So you as a practitioner,
Yeah.
what do you hear when you hear that? Like, how does that line up with what you do?
It 100% lines up with what I do, because 23 years professionally, I believe I haven't treated, I haven't fixed, I haven't healed a single person nor condition. I work with the nervous system, and when I hear that, there's certain concepts and terms that I'll share, but she probably arrived in that place because certain forces that we're going to call stress, physically, mentally, emotionally, chemically, disconnected her from that knowing. So she plugged in a system that allowed that interference, the absence of that coherence, to go away. And she used prayer. And what prayer did was allowed all of those frequencies, all of those stress patterns that was preventing communication through her nervous system to her cells. And she had this thing called, was it TB?
Tuberculosis.
Tuberculosis. And as a result of going through that prayer process, she nurtured and cultivated the intelligence within her nervous system. Remember, I said every 7 years we're brand new. It's not a question of the presence of this intelligence. It's only a question of this expression of this intelligence. So she began to express this intelligence more and more. And cells and tissues are constantly going through cell growth and regeneration and cell breakdown and degeneration.
Right.
When we're on the more stressful side, we lose coherence. We're in sympathetic tone, and that's my polite way of saying there's less life force and intelligence flowing through the system, which means cells are going through more degeneration and breakdown, meaning the cells have lost their shape,
Right.
they've lost their structure, they've lost their function. It's like, imagine purchasing a set of wheels for your car and they show up and they're triangular.
Right.
How well is a triangular wheel gonna? It's like cell shape meets structure meets function. So what she was able to do was to move that, so now the nervous system was in coherence.
Right.
And it created an environment where cells started to regenerate and reorganize with better shape, better structure, better function. The round wheels arrived.
Right.
Now she's rolling down the journey of life much, much smoother. That's an environment that creates a higher level of organization.
Right.
What does that look like on the outside? One day she had TB. The next month, year, several years, there's no more TB.
Right.
That's it.
Right. The body heals.
The body heals. The body heals. And it's as simple as this, Thomas. Like, if you and I cut ourselves in the kitchen tonight with a knife, we put a Band-Aid on, and it's not the Band-Aid that heals a cut.
Mm-hmm.
It's our nervous system. It's the intelligence that heals the cut.
Right.
If the cut's deep, we may go to the good doc and get stitches, but the stitches doesn't heal the cut. The stitches just makes it so when the new epithelial cells that are brought there by your body's intelligence and life force, it looks a little nicer.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning the pigmentation of the skin, the level and surface.
Yeah, and it allows the two sides to connect. And grow those cells and start to
exactly.
Start to do the healing.
But don't ever think it's the stitches that healed you.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And so now going back to your explanation of Myrtle.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I've thought about when I've thought about this and sat with it is the idea that within her nervous system, you know, the spinal cord, that whole intelligence that works down our back.
Right.
There was probably some blockages in there, and I'm thinking through the work of prayer and forgiveness as she worked with those and made affirmations of the health that they were in, like
right.
seeing them visually as a healthy liver, as a healthy kidney.
Yeah.
That she began to move those blockages so that the entire nervous system was actually communicating freely up and down. Would that make sense to you?
It makes sense. I can elaborate further on what I guess took place based on neuroscience today.
Yeah.
We didn't know this then, but what we know today is the nervous system, Thomas, doesn't know the difference between past, between present, between future. If we have a stressful event 20 seconds ago, 20 minutes ago, 20 years ago that we haven't adapted, learned, and grown from, because the nervous system wants to learn. It's a learning technology.
Okay.
Anything within our bandwidth and capacity comes in, our neurological bandwidth and capacity. We process it, we integrate it, we learn from it. Think about the first time we rode a bike.
Okay.
Training wheels on, can't do it. Trying to like just not hit the telephone pole and wipe out, right? What happens years later? I'm going to grab some water here.
Yeah.
So let's go back. Think about learning how to ride a bike. We're turning the pedals. We're negotiating the handlebars. We have training wheels on. We can barely ride this thing. Trying not to hit the telephone pole, the curb. The nervous system is going through neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. It is making new connections to this concept called riding a bike.
Okay.
Training wheels come off. Now we're riding on two wheels. Once we're on two wheels, we know how to ride a bike. We've developed the program for riding a bike. That is a neural network, a neural pathway. We go to a new environment like a city with a seawall. Yeah. We decide to rent a bike. But we haven't ridden a bike in 20 years.
Okay.
The nervous system pulls the program of riding a bike, and we can ride a bike effortlessly.
Right.
So knowing the nervous system is a learning technology, anything outside our bandwidth or capacity, the nervous system holds on to, even the stress, physical, mental, emotional, chemical.
Right.
That creates dissonance in the nervous system. That creates an absence of coherence.
Okay.
Now, that could have happened 20 years ago. Think of something stressful. 20 years ago, if you still have an emotional charge, that means your nervous system hasn't integrated, hasn't learned, hasn't grown from that experience.
Right.
Now, think about...
And so that would be trapped somewhere.
Trapped. And that's the foundation of my work. There's these neurological centers. I, work with people's systems on my tables, and I do things like meditations, coherence, where we breathe, we squeeze certain areas, so now we start to release what I call this potential energy to kinetic energy. So the same way our nervous system is living in a low-grade biological response of the original experience, even if it happened 20 years ago, because it's trying to integrate, trying to learn. what happens is our bandwidth gets smaller because now some of the neurological load of that intelligence and life force is trying to process that event. But now we're still living life, and these events continually start to build up. And when they start to build up continually, that bandwidth gets smaller, and that is the journey of life where all of a sudden we start getting taps on the shoulder, which look like aches, pains, symptoms physically, mentally, emotionally. And that's really our inner intelligence trying to get our attention.
Right.
Symptoms are the effect. Disease is the effect, the cause.
Dis-ease.
There's an absence of ease within the nervous system. Let's go back to our friend here that healed TB. She said, what were the words you used? How did she see herself?
I'm paraphrasing from the book, but she would basically, call upon her liver and apologize for ever thinking you were, sickly or wrong.
Yes.
And then in fact, affirming the health and the vibrancy and the life force of the liver.
Right. So physics, first law of thermodynamics, energy cannot be created. Energy cannot be destroyed. Energy can only be transformed. She has potential energy through her nervous system. Let's call it the liver. She is going through a sensory experience where she's forgiving the liver. She's seeing the liver as whole. She's seeing it, hearing it, smelling it, tasting it, intuitively feeling it in her body and skin. She's bringing her entire sensory experience. Our nervous system is a sensory regulator.
Right.
When we do that, the nervous system doesn't know the difference between what's real and perceived. This is visualization on steroids.
Right.
You're having a full sensory experience. The nervous system is our perception of reality. It's our consciousness.
Okay.
So now she's having a conscious experience. Again, this is my guess, understanding the story of what took place on a neurological, cellular, life force level. So now, guess what? Her nervous system is integrating these old patterns responsible for this thing called TB. The TB is the effect. That is what we call the cells when they're damaged. That's not the cause. The cause is an absence of this intelligence and life force communicating to her liver. So when that happens and she's integrating it, the same way we learned how to ride a bike, the nervous system wants to learn and goes through neurogenesis and neuroplasticity.
Okay.
So they start to unwire and unfire for the neurological programs and networks like riding a bike that are responsible for TB. And they start to go through neurogenesis and neuroplasticity that allows rewiring, refiring, and a new network based on a liver, a biology that is whole, that is vibrant, that is healthy, that is connected. To me, this is an exact science.
Right. Right.
And we know this now. We didn't, even when I was in school, we didn't know this much about the nervous system.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So she was doing this in the early 1900s, and it wasn't just her liver; it was every part of her body.
Every part of her body has TB. Yeah.
She didn't know where.
Yeah.
What or how, and she just knew that there
Right.
was something. I think the word she used was she figured out that an earthworm had the intelligence to only create an earthworm.
Right.
Whereas we had the intelligence to create this. And so if we
Yes.
had the intelligence to create this, we must have the intelligence to heal this.
She knew the intelligence that created us from two cells never abandoned us when we were born.
Right.
That's what she knew.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And, in the world of unity, she would call that God. Right. That was
Absolutely.
For her, that was, this was God at work. We were in the image and likeness of God, the creator, and she was that creator as well.
Exactly. And in my world, I call it, there's an intelligence. We have our innate intelligence. The same way, I never question or get stressed out about, will the sun rise today? Will the sun set today? I know there's a universal intelligence.
Right.
And to me, that's what God is. There's a universal intelligence, there's an innate intelligence, and somehow in my world, this is God.
Right. They're working together.
They're working together.
Yeah. So one of the things you love to talk about is human potential, and that's kind of where I started.
Yeah.
Because as I shared, it's easy for me to, I'll say it, this white kid in Canada to go, yeah, you can do whatever you want in this world, but there's plenty of people that might look at that and just think I'm privileged, and
right.
So what do I know?
Right.
And so knowing somebody like you with what you've
right.
gone through, and you're not some white kid in Canada like I am, and
yeah.
you've had some challenges. Like,
yeah.
When you think of human potential, where do you stand on that?
When I started my healing journey, when I started to get traction was when I started working on my nervous system. I started cultivating the intelligence and life force through my nervous system. I knew I was onto something. And that's when I started studying the nervous system. And now, like I'll say, for example, I read the Bhagavad Gita when I was 19.
Okay.
And that was the first time, Thomas, that I learned about this notion of duality and oneness. So our mind, our prefrontal cortex, wants to make things right, wrong, left, right, good, bad. And as I started learning about the nervous system, it lives in oneness. It doesn't see anything as good or bad. It's like, hey, there's this energy coming in, this physical experience, this mental experience, this emotional experience. Beautiful. Let's learn and grow. Let's adapt.
Right.
The nervous system lives in oneness. And, first law of thermodynamics, energy can't be created, can't be destroyed, only transformed. It just wants to transform the energy. And that's when I realized that in my worldview, our awareness and our consciousness is our nervous system. Because if our nervous system is trapped in the stress and trauma of yesterday, that's our perceptual lens of the world, and that's our consciousness.
Right. And you might refer to that as fight or flight. Right?
Fight or flight.
When you're trapped in that state, you can't make a good thought.
You're in sympathetic, you're in fight or flight, cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, and not only that, but your perceptual lens is you're going to get attacked by a saber-toothed tiger. So I have to look out. You're looking to be safe. Protective mechanism in the nervous system. Flip it, expand that awareness and consciousness, and knowing how incredible the life force and intelligence within us is, that's when I realized there are no limitations of matter. There's only limitations to our perceptual awareness of what's possible.
So mind.
If we can open up our perceptual lenses, it's like, oh, we're going to bring physics into the equation now. Are you okay with that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So every idea that you can think of, every big, audacious dream, possibility that has ever moved through your mind is a wavelength of possibility that exists in what I call the unified field.
Okay.
And once we become aware of that, all we have to do, and I have a little bit different twist on how things become reality, because I believe who we're being is directly related to our nervous system and our intelligence. It's almost like our nervous system is a frequency modulator connecting with a unified field at a very specific frequency and tone. An easy example I'd give is, if you like, what kind of music do you like?
Rock and roll, baby.
Rock and roll, baby. Okay. So if we had a radio here, we would set the dial to a rock and roll station.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a frequency modulator. It is sending a message to the unified field. It's connecting to a satellite. And now that receiver is coming back, and through our speakers, we're hearing rock and roll.
Right.
We're not hearing country. We're not hearing hip hop. We're not hearing rap. If we change the frequency of the message being sent out by moving to a new radio station, let's say a country radio station, well, guess what? That wave that's being collapsed into a particle of reality called rock music goes away. And now we're attuned to a new frequency called country music.
Right.
Now we're listening to country music. This analogy, Thomas, is precisely how the nervous system works.
Right.
So the thoughts are the start of what's possible. But let me break down the nervous system for us. 2.5% of the nervous system is our thoughts, our prefrontal cortex.
Okay.
2.5% of our nervous system is how our body feels. 95% of our nervous system is the autonomic nervous system, who we are being.
Right.
That represents where we are within ourselves.
So let's stop for a moment. So who we are being.
Yes.
Let's define that.
Okay.
And also I think the autonomic nervous system is our breathing. It's our
Breathing,
it's all the things that just
heart
happen
rate,
without us even thinking about
digestion.
it, right?
It's automatic.
Yeah,
it's below
automatic.
our level of awareness.
Autonomic.
Yeah.
There's the word automatic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So all of that is happening.
Yeah.
And then there's the context of who we are being.
Yes. So Fillmore, was that her name?
Yeah.
Myrtle
Fillmore.
Myrtle Fillmore. When she was praying to her cells, who is she being? Was she being a person with dis-ease, or was she being a person that was whole, vitalized, and in pure ease?
Yeah, I would say she was connected to herself and in a place of receptivity, in a place of openness, in a place of actually looking for greatness. You know, I don't know what other word to use, but just inviting full possibility into herself at that point.
So she was embodying an experience even though her biology hadn't fully arrived there.
Right. So her current state was in one place.
Yes.
The physical state was in
Yes.
one place.
Yeah.
But her mental state and her own perception of the way things were, she was shifting that into a way of being.
Yes.
That was, so she was arriving at the place of being before everything else caught up to her.
So for me, being is tuning your nervous system to the radio station of the genre of biology you want.
Right.
That's what being is. That's what embodying is for me in my world.
Right. So I want to share an example of this, because
Yeah.
you've shared this example with me before, and it's the idea of when you started on the Ironman journey.
Yeah.
And you went to the swimming pool.
Yes.
When you really weren't a great swimmer, if I understand correctly.
I'm an adult onset swimmer, so truth be told, I could not swim.
You could not swim. So you showed up in like the Adidas shorts. And,
like board surfer shorts.
Sports with long hair, all of that stuff. And just thought, hey, I'm now going to swim like an Ironman competitor.
Yeah.
And got into the pool and almost drowned.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But you saw somebody who was there that was very serious
About their swimming.
And it was a guy probably roughly your age. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
There was actually a whole bunch of triathletes
A whole bunch
there.
of triathletes.
They all looked the same.
All look the same. So
Yeah.
they had
Swim cap.
Yeah.
Okay. Very small goggles.
Yeah.
I had big goggles. I had no swim cap.
Yeah.
All of them had Speedos.
Yeah.
And their bodies were completely shaven.
Right.
No hair on their bodies. Because
Right.
that's what triathletes do. You shave your body.
Right. And so you saw that.
Yes.
And you decided to then show up at the pool the next day.
Yes.
Like that.
Like that.
Even though you were nowhere near the physical swimming capability
Yes.
of who they were at that point.
Correct.
Point in time.
I went shopping. I went shopping and I got a razor. And the next day, if you saw 30 of us on the pool deck, you wouldn't be able to see which one is the odd one out. And the day before, I was clearly the odd one out.
Right. So this is what you're talking about in saying, who am I being?
Yes.
And so before you arrived at the ability, you
Yeah.
had already put it in motion.
Yes.
So I know I did a talk on this recently. It's the idea of I'm already there,
Yes.
and I'm going to act and be like I'm already that which I want myself to be.
Yeah.
And because I say so, I am that.
Yes.
Now everything else just needs to catch up.
Yes.
Is that
Correct.
Would that be a good way to?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And the universe will challenge you.
Right.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
Of course it will. Yeah.
And when it does challenge you, It's how you show up. Like, here's an example. So one of the classic things when it comes to, some might refer to this as manifestation, creation. What was that book called back in the day? The Secret.
The Secret. Yeah.
Okay.
The movie, The Secret. Yeah.
The book, The
Yeah,
Secret.
yeah.
Okay. So I liked the book. However, I was incredibly challenged by the book because I thought it was so incomplete. Because our thoughts are only responsible for 2.5. And the idea it pretty much got across was, if I can think about it, then it'll be manifested.
Right.
And I go, that cannot be further from the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because we need to invoke the 95%.
Right.
And so when we go through that, and when we start to see how we're showing up in this world, and let's say, for example, we want to attract more abundance, and let's just say, hey, I want my paychecks to be bigger. So you're living this abundant life, everything, and then you get a parking ticket in the mail, and it's $40, and you get bent out of shape for 4 days about it.
Mm-hmm.
You are not being the abundant person, because the abundant person would look at that and be like, oh, that sucks. Oh, well, and pay it and move on.
Yeah, and I would even add, it's a good thing I have the money to pay for it.
Exactly.
It's a good thing I have a job. It's a good
Yes.
thing that I'm in a place where I can actually take care of that and
Yes.
move on.
Yes.
Right?
So it's about that. It's about who you're being, because the universe will challenge you. Why will it challenge you? Because it's a precise science. Because you're in the becoming of your nervous system, your intelligence and life force firing at a new frequency, that new radio station, you're still in the old radio station. You're still listening to the rock music.
Right.
You haven't arrived at the country music yet.
Right.
But you got your country hat, your country shirt, and you're like, I'm going to country this thing out. Yet, you're like, but I still hear the rock music.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Right.
So you have to be in the becoming, knowing that you're on the journey to become that.
Right. It's almost like you're still, if I think of that in the terms of the frequency in the station, you're still attracting the remnants of that old frequency.
Yeah.
And you haven't fully dialed in.
Yes.
And it's as if I were to take this to unity principle number 5,
Right.
being in action, living
in
the truth
Yes.
right, is
Yeah.
the actual principle.
Yes.
Then if this is your new truth,
Yes.
it's living that truth. And along the way, there's still going to be some speed bumps and some old things that are going to show up.
They're going to show up.
And I almost think of it like, see if this fits. I almost think of it like, it's like, how bad do you want this?
How bad do you want it?
Because we're gonna see now.
Mm-hmm.
Is this really something you want?
Yes.
Or is it just lip service? Because
Yeah.
if it is that, you're
Yeah.
gonna fall back to the old way,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
that new way of being isn't gonna land.
Yes. And, I'll share, like, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about this conversation we're having, which I'm loving, by the way. This is my shtick. I can talk all day, every day about this. I believe it was set up this way because if I look at my life being raised on the other side of the tracks, crime, violence, addictions, I wasn't integrating everything, which meant I wasn't evolving, I wasn't learning, I wasn't growing. My nervous system wasn't going through the neuroplasticity that would make it responsible for that expansion of consciousness. So from age 12 to 14 to 16 to 18, I just kept getting taps. And the taps got louder and louder and louder, and I was not listening. And because I wasn't listening, it literally had to bring me to my knees, which it did. Threw me on a bed for 3 months. And obviously when I was in it, it didn't feel great. But today, it was the greatest gift I've ever experienced.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, dude, if you're not listening, we're gonna really make you listen.
We're really going to make you listen.
Yeah.
And I, like, we didn't make this up. You didn't make this
Right.
up. I didn't make this up. This is just me, when I take a step back, having served hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people all over the world, I'm just like, why is that? Like, why do we experience physical, mental, emotional pain, suffering, discomfort, illness, disease? And from my lens and understanding neurology, physiology, and physics, this is what I have deduced. Like, this is the journey that we're on. I believe we are here to evolve, to grow, to expand consciousness. And if we're not sprinting on that journey, we're going to get taps on the shoulders.
Right. Right. And you were in an extreme environment.
Yes.
So the
very
tapping
extreme.
you were getting was like, if
Yes.
you don't change, you're
Yeah.
dead.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm so dense that almost happened.
Right.
So you're smarter than me.
right.
You don't need a multitude of shovels being hit on your face before you'd be like, wait a second,
Right.
I might need to look at this differently.
Right. And I'm sure as many people out there can attest, they've had their own experience. I've had my own experience where it took a lot to get me to this place where I am now. Yet this, when I think back as, a 15-year-old kid, 14-year-old kid, I chose to be an altar boy.
Right.
Like, when I think back, it's like, why did I choose that?
Yeah.
That I did not hang out with people like that. I was not in a place
Yeah.
in my life. Like I was doing recreational drugs then.
Right.
And
Yeah.
yet somehow I stopped and went, I think I want to be an altar boy. And
Right.
then I ran away from that. And when I did, I went further down
Right.
the hole
Yeah.
to a darker place. Right.
Right.
And then from there, it's like, now I'm in this place.
Now you're in this place.
And it's like, wow,
Here we are.
It's crazy.
It's
right?
life come full circle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So something you and I have talked about, and I would love your input on this, is the kids choosing their parents. That whole idea, right?
Yeah.
That we don't choose our kids; they
Yeah.
choose us. So
Yeah.
when somebody says that to Dr. Sukhi, or when you talk about that, what are you saying? Because if I'm the skeptic, the doubting Thomas that
Yeah.
I am,
Yeah.
I'm like, that sounds like a whole bunch of woo-woo stuff to me.
Right. Okay. So this is where I depart from being Dr. Sukhi and I move more into being Sukhi, the very Indian person.
Okay.
In that I'm Indian. My family's from India. I was born in Glasgow, Scotland. I was raised in Canada. And when I look at my journey through my own spiritual evolution led me down a path that allowed me to connect with my roots. Spent lots of time in India and very much learned spirituality from a yogic Indian tradition.
Okay.
And a big part of that Indian tradition is this notion of karma. Okay. Do you want to talk about karma for a second?
yeah.
Why don't you go ahead? You can share your lens of what you think karma is. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for me, karma is the idea that how, what I reap, I sow. Like it's me showing up in the world and expecting that how I'm showing up is somehow going to give me different results.
Right. Okay.
Like I should expect something greater
Yeah.
than the actual person I am being, or how I'm treating others, or how I'm lensing at the world, if you will.
Okay. Beautiful. So when I was in India as a teenager, one of the elders would constantly say to me, Brahmadanda, Brahmadanda. Brahmadanda is a term in Sanskrit that means the entire intelligence in the universe lives within your spine, which is the home for the nervous system. So how this dude knew I was going to start doing what I was doing, and he said, you're going to go and teach these principles back in your land. I was like, I don't know, at age 16, I don't know if that's happening anytime soon. And here I am for the past 23 years. That's precisely what I've been doing. So in this work, if I take the Dr. Sukhi hat, there is experiences, inputs, I believe, within people's nervous systems that may, and based on your philosophy, may not be of this life and this world.
Okay.
I believe, with my very Indian background and the studies I've done there, that all the patterning of a soul's evolution is being put into our present nervous system. So if I take a step back and think it's our journey of our growth and evolution and expansion of consciousness, I also see every human being as an individual cell for this organism called humanity evolving humanity as a conscious whole.
Right.
And so for me, I choose to believe that the people, places, and things that will be the catalyst for our greatest growth and evolution, i.e. pushing our buttons, are going to show up in our world. You know, family, professionally, 23 years. I mean, I can't even tell you how many patterns, issues people have with mom, with dad, with brother, with sister. You can divorce your spouse, but you cannot divorce your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, your cousin. They'll always be, you can not talk to them for 20 years, but they'll always be that to you.
Yeah, or your kids.
Or your kids.
Yeah.
Same thing. So it became clear to me that the greatest love and connection comes from these people, but also the greatest gifts, which won't look like gifts initially. They'll look like pushing your buttons.
Right. And they may never look like gifts if you're not if you're not a person who's willing to
If you're
look.
not willing to do the work,
Yeah. Yeah.
then you may not, you just may see them as a pain in the ass and
Yeah.
you know, depart, exit stage left.
They're wrong.
Yeah.
It's all on them.
And for me, like, I call that, it's a disconnection from their intelligence and life force, which is the ego body.
Right.
Because, and in that moment, they may feel righteous about that decision. So, yet, I know, because I've experienced it thousands of times, they'll show up in whatever capacity they do in my ecosystem, and they ruminate over it. And it causes them heartache, and it causes them pain. And sure, maybe at the local pub when they're hanging out with the boys, they're all good with it, but deep down inside, they're not. And you can see that. So I believe that, I don't know how, but I believe somewhere in the spiritual, angelic ecosystem that in Indian tradition, they actually believe, and we actually had a ceremony for our first daughter at the 8-week mark, is when the soul enters the womb of a pregnant mom. And up until then, the sex isn't determined, the soul is not fully carnated in, and actually souls will actually come in and out up until that time. So it's sort of like, you know, we say that to our daughter, like, well, you chose us. And a handful of times she said, well, I didn't choose you.
I want to re-choose.
I want to re-choose. I want a do-over. Obviously, it's during those times where we have that in our house. But that's what I believe.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So inside of that, you kind of tipped into something else I wanna sort of touch on here, which is this idea of how it should go,
Yeah.
how things should go, versus allowing. And this came up earlier for you and I today in a discussion we were having. This idea of how somebody else should respond to something,
Yes.
right? And then we get triggered, or we want to tell them what they should be doing or how they should live. And so how do you manage that within yourself? Because you're just like me, you're just like everybody else that's watching this. Have these, you can see things and you can go, hey man, I would not do it that way.
Yeah.
Right. But yet there's telling somebody how to live their life when they're not asking for your guidance now is not a good place to start, especially in those relationships that are near and dear to us.
Right.
What does Dr. Sukhi do?
So what I've learned, because a big part of what I do is sort of coach and consult as well. And what I've learned doing this professionally is I see the magnitude of the impact that it has when people come up with an epiphany for themselves. And so as best we can, when I know something and I see something, rather than give advice, and my mentor taught me this, like the word advice is adding vices. That one stung. I was like, adding vices.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
Wow.
Think
Yeah.
about that. Like the first time I heard that was 26 years ago from my mentor. And when he said that, I was like, I had to wipe my chin off the ground. Like, holy smokes. Like, advices, you're adding vices. So we're all well intended, especially if they're loved ones. So the last thing we want to do is add vices. So then it's about, how can I help them see what I think it could possibly be, or nurture them on the journey to develop their own awareness. It might be what I think, but it might not. I don't have it all figured out. And so inviting that, it certainly starts with two people who are in a place of coherence, meaning if you're having a difference, you're having a fight, you're both in sympathetic response, you're both looking out for the saber-toothed tiger, that is not the time to lead somebody on that journey.
Right.
I have a saying, time and space heals. Take a step back, take a breath in. I do this with my girls. My girls are now, my eldest is 11, my youngest is turning 8 next month. So 11 and 8 years old. And if they're in the middle of a meltdown, and I've seen this time and time again at the park, you see parents jump in, and they're very well intended. They jump in, they start like lecturing, do not hit your sister, this, that, what's going on here? And they try to figure it out right there, and the kids are just screaming, they're having meltdowns. And I know from a neurological perspective, nothing is being absorbed from those children. Nothing, zero. So the parent is just wasting their time. So for me, it's like, okay, back pocket. This is what's went down, back pocket. Through time, it might be that evening. It might be the next day. It might be the next week. We're driving in the car, and I'll be like, hey, Indira, do you remember last Friday? Do you remember when X and Y happened? She's like, oh, yeah, I remember that. I go, so let's have a conversation about it. So it's like opening up that when you're in that place of coherence, which is you're in your heart, you're in that place of connection, and it's having that conversation. And for me, it's still an art, but man, when I find the right, meaning the correct question, the light bulbs go off for people, because then they're able to answer it for themselves, and it's sticky. And then I have not added any vices to their journey.
Right. No, that's really helpful. And I mean, that reminds me a lot of the spiritual counseling classes I took, is the idea of asking the question, of listening. But I think what you bring up really important is the idea of, my saying is, time is the great thickener of things.
Yes.
Right. When you can let time pass, it can settle down, it can thicken, and it's not this massive, huge, expanding anger moment. It's something that can be brought into a place of coherence, is the word you would use, right, where you can have a conversation. And I think also what's important to realize is that, and we kind of touched on this earlier today in our separate conversation, which is this idea like, why are you doing that? To be doing, that's not really a question. That's a statement. It's
a statement.
Right? As opposed to waiting and going, I was noticing that, I'm curious, do you know why you do that?
Yes.
Like there's actually a compassionate question of real curiosity, as opposed to an angered statement that says you're an idiot.
Completely.
Really.
Yeah, completely. I agree. 100%. Yeah. And the difference is, Thomas, is where you are within yourself when you directed the question.
Right.
Because, a question isn't because there's a question mark on the end or your voice came up. The question is where you are within yourself.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Good thing to look at. So I want to share, because, just having been a friend of yours for as long as I have, I'm so super proud of what you've accomplished in, pushing yourself from, being very sick a couple of years ago. Where I was quite involved in your life at that point.
I talked about it from the stage on the weekend, actually.
I
called It's a new term I have, NDE, near death experience. I've had
Right.
2 now.
Okay.
18 and 48.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And then seeing now where you're on your way to the World Championships as an Ironman athlete, as an amateur Ironman athlete.
Yeah.
And so, obviously that's great, and we can celebrate it, and our egos would love it. It's like,
Yeah,
whoa, look at me
totally.
go.
Yeah.
But so what does a day look like for training? And let's use today, because I know when I picked you up, you looked a little sleepy.
Yeah.
And you said, I did 2 training sessions today, and I might not have wanted to. So what does 2 training sessions look like for an Ironman athlete?
Yeah. So I love to be in my body, and I know what connects me, and definitely meditation, definitely prayer, definitely breathing, definitely good foods, nurturing foods, definitely physically moving connects me. I've been an athlete my whole life, and it's very much my chosen path. Ironman triathlon is a 3.8 kilometer swim or 2.4 miles, 180 kilometer bike or 112 miles. Then you run a marathon. So that's 42.2 kilometers or 26.2 miles. Mm-hmm. It is considered to be the most challenging single day event on planet Earth. It's not for the faint of hearts. I'm an 8-time finisher now. And yeah, I went from being pretty close to my deathbed to knowing I was turning 50 the following year, the year I turned 49. And pretty much everyone's saying, hey, you're not going to get to that start line. And me saying, not only am I going to get to the start line, I'm going to get to the finish line. And even to my surprise, ended up qualifying to, be arguably out of 8 billion people on the planet in the top 1,500 in terms of being fittest, fastest, healthiest humans on the planet.
Right.
And probably about 150, 200 of those athletes will be in my age group, 50 to 54. So the journey to becoming one of the fittest, fastest 50-year-olds on the planet is really looking at your entire life, personally and professionally, and being able to set it up for a lifestyle. These are not things that you do, as a back burner. And if you want to have a great day tomorrow, it starts with a great night tomorrow. You want to have a great week next week, it starts with what you do the previous week. So sleep is a very big part of my life. I go to bed at 8:30 every night. I typically wake up without an alarm between 4:15 and 4:45. I usually have my first training session. So I swim, I bike, I run, I do strength training, I do mobility training. That equates to 17 training sessions a week. So there's 7 days in a week. So most days it's 2 to 3 sessions a day. This morning I had a bike workout, and it was a VO2 max session. VO2 max is self-limiting. But I spent 22 minutes at VO2 max at about 1 minute intervals, pretty much pedal to the metal. Very, very tough workout.
So this is, you go as hard as you can for 1 minute.
Hard as you possibly can for 1 minute.
Rest.
You rest. First you rest for 1 minute, then you go hard for a minute, then you rest for 50 seconds, hard for a minute, then 40 seconds, and the intervals for rest get shorter. And we pyramided that training session this morning. That was an hour long. I was spent after that. I went up, got something to eat, knowing that I was coming here, which I had to travel via ferry. And by the time I got home, it'd be 8 at night. I knew that I had to get in my second session before I got on the ferry, which was a strength training session. Okay. So I go up, I eat something, and then I come back and I do a 55-minute strength session, which was a combination of deadlifts, squats, and front presses.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was today's workout.
Well, thanks. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I was looking pretty tired when I got here, but we picked up the energy.
Oh man, as soon as I know you well enough that as soon as this conversation hits hits the platform, it's
Yeah.
like, okay, let's
go.
Let's talk about
Let's
this
go.
stuff.
Yeah.
Sukhi, my friend, thank you so much
Thanks for having me, Thomas.
for being here with me today. Again, I think this is our third or fourth time we've had one of these conversations together, and they
Yes.
always get better and deeper and richer.
They do.
And so, thank you, my friend.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
Love and appreciate you, man.
Namaste.
Yeah. Thanks,
Likewise.
Brad. Yeah.
Thanks so much, everybody. Cheers.